A shadow of a coming tempest loomed over the world. But within it, a different kind of dawn was breaking. It was a dawn born from the fusion of revolutionary scientific discovery and the chilling specter of global war. Long before the atom was split in a laboratory, its destructive potential had been imagined. This haunting vision filled the pages of H.G. Wells's 1914 novel, The World Set Free. Wells's prophetic vision of atomic bombs and the atom as an immense reservoir of energy was unnervingly accurate. Decades later, when scientists began to grasp the true implications of nuclear fission, a clandestine military intelligence investigation was launched. It discreetly bought up copies of Wells's book. This imaginative foresight became a terrifying reality in late 1938 and early 1939. Building on the foundational work of Otto Hahn and Fritz Strassmann, Austrian physicist Lise Meitner and her nephew, Otto Frisch, provided the crucial theoretical explanation of nuclear fission. Meitner had fled Nazi Germany. She grappled with Hahn's perplexing experimental results. She realized that the uranium nucleus was splitting towards barium. This process released an astonishing 200 million electron volts per atom. Yet, despite her pivotal role, Hahn initially dismissed her insights as absurd. He even published his findings without her. Meitner's crucial theoretical explanation, initially downplayed and overlooked, would become the cornerstone of practical application. It challenged the very notion that scientific discovery is purely theoretical or always immediately recognized. Years later, her exclusion from the Nobel Prize left her feeling almost insulting and unjust. She lamented Hahn's silence about their 30 years of collaboration. As Europe plunged deeper into geopolitical instability and Nazism tightened its grip, the scientific community grasped the horrifying implications. If such power could be harnessed, it could decide the fate of nations. The terrifying fear of enemy atomic weapon development, particularly by Germany, spurred a desperate urgency. Scientists, acutely aware of the stakes, felt compelled to alert the United States government. This urgent plea culminated in a seminal Einstein-Szilard letter of 1939, penned by Leo Szilard and signed by Albert Einstein. This letter to President Roosevelt served as the critical catalyst. It initiated nascent United States government support for tubuloy or uranium research. The initial funding, a paltry $6,000, belied the monumental scale the project would soon assume. Then, on December 7, 1941, the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor ripped through the nation's complacency. It galvanized the United States into full wartime production. Overnight, the nascent research transformed into an all-out commitment to developing advanced weaponry. The S-1 section, just a day before the attack, had already proposed an all-out effort. This paved the way for the formal establishment of the Manhattan Engineer District and the project. It marked an irreversible commitment to large-scale development that would usher in a new age of power. This burgeoning American effort was further bolstered by foundational groundwork and collaborative insights from the British Tube Alloys project. This ensured a shared scientific and strategic footing. By the close of this initial phase, the scientific feasibility of atomic power was unequivocally established. The United States government, now fully committed, had embarked on a massive, unprecedented, and utterly secret project. It aimed at developing an atomic bomb, a weapon they hoped would swiftly end World War II and forever alter the course of human history. The relentless drive to forge a war-ending weapon, born from the chilling specter of global conflict, pushed the United States into an unprecedented undertaking. This was the Manhattan Project. This monumental endeavor, a fusion of scientific ambition and wartime urgency, demanded a secure, large-scale industrial complex dedicated to the production of tubuloy. The decision solidified in September 1942. It culminated from a critical meeting at the Bohemian Grove. This meeting secured Edgar Sengia's vital uranium supply and designated a secluded stretch of East Tennessee as Site X. The site was chosen for its isolation, abundant power from the Tennessee Valley Authority's Norris Dam, and vast tracts of available land. This rural landscape was about to be irrevocably transformed. On September 19, 1942, the official acquisition of this land marked what many would later call Oak Ridge's birthday. Yet, this celebration of a national project was, for thousands, the beginning of a profound loss. Families whose roots ran generations deep into the Appalachian soil were forcibly displaced from their ancestral lands. Their lives and livelihoods were reduced to a formula on a government ledger. The human cost of this acquisition, the emotional and cultural losses that no compensation could truly cover, was immense. It was a stark counterpoint to the scientific progress it enabled. In parallel, Site Y, soon to be known as Los Alamos, New Mexico, was established. It served as the primary hub for designing the gadget, creating a dual front of research and production. As the physical foundations of the atomic bomb project took shape, so too did a new, diverse workforce begin to stream into the nascent secret city of Oak Ridge. Celia Sapka, a young woman from the declining coal country of Pennsylvania, arrived in August 1943. She stepped off the train to nowhere, into the humid, stagnant hello of the Tennessee summer. She found herself in a landscape of denuded soils and pervasive mud. Her expensive Miller shoes were quickly ruined. She was literally carried by a driver to the castle on the hill, the administration building. This was a vivid introduction to the raw, unfinished reality of her new, mysterious home. For Cathy Strickland, a black woman recruited for janitorial services, the journey brought a different kind of stark reality. Her new home was a 16-foot by 16-foot plywood hutment shared with her husband Willie. It offered barely enough room for their belongings and lacked real windows. It stood in stark, cramped contrast to the massive, sprawling industrial plants that were rapidly rising around them. This was an early, undeniable sign of the deep-seated segregation that would define her life in the secret city. Construction on Site X had begun rapidly in late 1942. It transformed the quiet rural valleys into a cacophony of engines and human endeavor. The initial goal was ambitious. It was to establish 3 core plants, Y12, X10, and K25, by the fall of 1943. These immense structures, destined to process and enrich uranium, would soon dominate the landscape. Amidst this industrial boom, a pivotal scientific breakthrough occurred far away in Chicago. On December 2, 1942, Enrico Fermi achieved the first sustained nuclear chain reaction at Chicago Pile 1, or CP1. This historic moment proved the theoretical feasibility of atomic energy. It marked a definitive turning point in scientific history. It provided the ultimate green light for the unprecedented industrial complex now rising in Tennessee. The physical infrastructure for the atomic bomb project was rapidly taking shape. But this came at a profound human cost to displaced communities. The initial scientific hurdles were overcome, proving the concept. The urgent drive to forge a war-ending weapon had by early 1945 transformed the Clinton Engineer Works, or CEW, in Oak Ridge, Tennessee, into a sprawling, self-contained industrial powerhouse. Tens of thousands of ordinary individuals, predominantly women, toiled in extreme secrecy. They meticulously developed the processes for uranium enrichment. Their hands, minds, and lives were deeply woven into the fabric of a world-altering weapon. Yet they remained largely unaware of its precise nature. The scale of the endeavor was staggering. It demanded 3 distinct and massive plants. E12 was for electromagnetic separation. K25 was for gaseous diffusion. S50 was for liquid thermal diffusion. This represented a diversification of risk against the ticking clock of war. At the gargantuan K25 plant, a U-shaped structure stretching half a mile long, the deafening rumble of machinery became the constant soundtrack of existence for workers like Cathy, a cleaner. She and her 30 fellow janitors worked in concrete caverns. They scrubbed massive steel tanks until they gleamed. They threw damp sawdust on the floor and swept it away to create a glass-like shine. The noise was so pervasive that communication required shouting. This was a constant strain on the vocal cords and the nerves. Colleen Rowan, a leak pipe inspector, navigated a maze of pipes in an enormous open airplane hangar-sized room. The clinks and clanks echoed off multi-story ceilings. With her gas-emitting probe, she meticulously checked every centimeter of every weld. She was constantly aware of the GI supervisor's chilling warning. "If you smell something, anything funny, you be sure to get out of here," he would say. She never asked what something funny might be, the unspoken threat a constant companion. In the Y12 plant, the heart of electromagnetic separation beat with the pulse of Calutrone cubicle operators Like Dot and Helen, perched on stools for 8-hour shifts, they faced a gauntlet of technology. This included panels of knobs, dials, gauges, and meters. Dot focused intently on keeping her machines R-high, prioritizing output. This was true even as the unit threatened to go berserk. When it did, Paul Wilkinson, a supervisor with remarkably clean hands, would intervene. He would calm the machine until it would purr like a kitten. Helen, ever vigilant, understood that people were always listening. She often bypassed protocol, adjusting her machine when monitors were absent. She navigated an area where terrifyingly strong magnets could pull bobby pins from hair and unhinge watches. They regularly emptied e-boxes, collecting unknown materials. They meticulously charted data like M voltage and G voltage. All this was done without understanding the deeper significance of their actions. Meanwhile, chemists like Virginia Spivey worked in labs, analyzing tubuli. These were the precious cakes of yellow and green that were the elusive unspoken link. Despite her science degree, Virginia noted how promotion barriers for women were common. Negative evaluations were sometimes used to limit raises and advancement. These were the ordinary workers, some of them high school girls, who proved more effective at operating these complex machines than PhD scientists. They demonstrated a disciplined approach that valued execution over inquiry. The rapid expansion of Oak Ridge to accommodate this workforce led to severe housing shortages and primitive living conditions. The Happy Valley trailer encampment, for instance, housed hundreds in identical trailers. One was shared by Colleen Rowan's family. Young Joe Rowan lived in constant fear of Germans beyond the barbed wire fence. Her mother Bess tried to lighten the mood, repeating, "It's only temporary, it's just like camping." But it was far from camping. Their double trailer, crammed with up to 11 people, lacked basic amenities. Water had to be hauled from distribution centers and drained into slop jars. A single, oil-leaking stove provided both heat and cooking. This was a constant fire risk. Summers were hot and dusty. Winters brought mud from frog stranglers of rain. Bright streetlights shone all night, making true rest elusive. Laundry was a Sisyphean battle against pervasive soot and mud. There was even the fear of a shredder at the communal drop-off. Amidst this immense secretive scientific and industrial endeavor, the mundane lives of the workers unfolded. Catty, in her cramped hutment, found solace in cooking. She strategically offered brown-bottomed biscuits and stew beef to guards as a form of bribery to maintain access to her boyfriend. Couples like Celia and Henry navigated the challenges of dating and early marriage. Community dances on the townsite tennis courts offered a crucial outlet for jitterbugs and Lindy Hops. Organized recreation, from bowling leagues to symphony orchestras, bloomed from the mud. This was a testament to the irrepressible life force of the people striving to build a Rockwellian world under an Orwellian backdrop. Yet the Orwellian backdrop was ever present. Extreme secrecy and compartmentalization were paramount. This fostered an environment of rumors, speculation, and profound psychological strain. Celia Sapka, an administrative worker, experienced this directly upon returning from a visit home to her ailing father in early 1945. She was subjected to a bizarre interrogation by an army colonel. She was hooked to a machine and questioned about her seemingly innocuous filing, dictation, and memo writing. This intense scrutiny, even for administrative roles, revealed the pervasive nature of security concerns. It ensured that anyone could be a creep. The constant fear of being watched, of saying the wrong thing, was a heavy burden. The psychological toll was so significant that by Halloween 1944, Dr. Clark, the on-site head of psychiatric services, recognized neurotic reactions due to fatigue among executives. He also noted the difficulties of housekeeping and the inability of mothers to get away from the constant care of children, as exacting a heavy toll. He noted the frustration of minor scientific group members trapped in repetitive analyses without context. This led to a unique kind of battle fatigue, for which he urged improved mental health services. This strain was starkly embodied by a young naval ensign housed in Rosemary's requisition department. He rambled about his job and expressed a dangerous desire to warn the Emperor of Japan about CEW's secrets. Rosemary, a nurse, assisted in electroshock therapy for the ensign. She braced his limbs during the procedure, which induced a grand mal seizure. She doubted he would leave the barred apartment until the war ended, and Oak Ridge's secrets were revealed. This highlighted the human cost of isolation and the pervasive security concerns. Racial segregation policies of the era were rigorously enforced within CEW. This led to distinct and unequal living conditions. Katty Strickland, a black woman, lived in a 16-foot by 16-foot plywood hutment with her husband, Willie. This was a stark contrast to the rapidly rising industrial plants. These basic structures lacked real windows and offered barely enough room for their belongings. Segregation extended to cafeterias, and even the bizarre ruling that black married couples were forbidden from visiting each other's homes. This was a severe breach of promises made by the War Manpower Board. This systemic issue was not just about housing. Skilled African American scientists and engineers, like mathematician J. Ernest Wilkins, Jr., had their transfers blocked due to race. Organized complaints from groups like the Colored Camp Council, who poignantly referenced black soldiers fighting for democracy abroad while their families faced discrimination at home, were often met with robust background checks on the council members. The project progressed. The X-10 graphite reactor had gone critical on November 4, 1943. This was a crucial step towards plutonium production. By early 1945, the K-25 and 50 plants operationalized. They significantly boosted enrichment capabilities. Katty witnessed the monstrous building of K-25 come alive with a deafening rumble. Steam rose for miles, a visible sign of its full functionality. The S-50 plant, despite its leaky joints, successfully moved steam. It yielded its first product the day before Halloween 1944. K-25 began sending its first enriched supplies of tubuloy to Y-12 by March 1945. There, lab analyst Virginia reported a 98.9% enrichment level. This prompted her supervisor to exclaim, "Oh my, that is wonderful." The project faced immense logistical challenges. None were more extraordinary than the scarcity of critical materials. To overcome the shortage of copper for Y-12's massive Calitron magnets, the project secured an extraordinary loan of 13,040 short tons of silver. This silver was valued at over $300 million. It came from the United States Treasury. This was a transaction that baffled officials accustomed to dealing in troy ounces, but the most profound ethical compromise occurred in March 1945. On Saturday, March 24th, African-American construction worker Eb Cade was involved in a head-on automobile accident. He suffered multiple fractures. Hospitalized the next day, Cade was designated HP-12. This transformed him from an accident victim into an unwitting human subject. On March 26th, a recommendation arrived for plutonium injections. On April 10th, in a cold antiseptic lab, Cade received his first injection of 4.7 micrograms of plutonium. It was administered under the oversight of doctors like Friedel and Clark. 5 days later, his bones were set. His teeth were removed for testing. This revealed a darker, unethical side to the war effort. It was a desperate attempt to understand the unknown physiological hazards of tubuloy or plutonium-239. Secretary of War Henry Stimson's tour of CEW on April 11, 1945, underscored the unprecedented scale and secrecy of the operation. Needing ramps to navigate the sprawling facility, he later recorded in his diary that it was the most wonderful and unique operation that probably has ever existed in the world. He famously remarked, next time I see Franklin too, I'll tell him that the Army has been able to do more for Tennessee while fighting a war than the TVA accomplished with all its dams." By early 1945, Oak Ridge had become a fully operational industrial powerhouse. It successfully enriched uranium and produced plutonium. It provided the fissile material necessary for the atomic bomb. Its tens of thousands of workers, from scientists to janitors, had contributed to a world-changing invention, yet they remained largely unaware of their profound role in ushering in the atomic age. They were cogs in a colossal clandestine machine. Their everyday sacrifices and struggles were hidden behind fences. Their true purpose was shrouded in an impenetrable veil of secrecy. Roosevelt's sudden death on April 12, 1945, plunged Harry S.A. Truman into the presidency. He was a man entirely unbriefed on the nation's most profound secret. He inherited not just a war-torn world, but the ultimate decision over a weapon he knew nothing about. 2 weeks later, on April 25th, the new president sat with Secretary of War Henry Stimson and General Leslie Groves. He listened, absorbing the staggering details of the Manhattan Project. It was a clandestine enterprise that had consumed billions and now promised a power capable of altering the very fabric of war. The weight of this revelation settled upon him. It forced a rapid immersion into the complexities of atomic diplomacy. Just 13 days after Truman's briefing, on May 8, 1945, the war in Europe officially ended. VE Day brought jubilant celebrations across the Allied nations. It was a collective sigh of relief for a continent ravaged by years of brutal conflict, but for the Manhattan Project, this victory only sharpened its focus. The gadget was never solely intended for Germany. Its purpose was to bring the entire global conflict to an end. The full might of the project, its scientific ambition and industrial capacity, now pivoted entirely to the Pacific theater. It was aimed squarely at Japan. The urgency, far from diminishing, intensified. It was driven by the grim calculus of potentially millions more casualties in a protracted invasion. In this intensified climate, Lieutenant Colonel Paul Tibbets, a seasoned pilot, had already been handpicked. His mission was to lead the highly specialized 509th Composite Group. His ultimate mission was to deliver the gadget. His crews, operating from Wendover Army Airfield, meticulously practiced their deadly craft. They flew modified B-29s, simulating bomb drops with heavy pumpkin casings. These were conventional bombs designed to mimic the atomic weapon's ballistic characteristics. These were not just training runs. They were rehearsals for a moment that would forever change warfare. They honed the precision and timing required for a weapon unlike any other. The culmination of years of scientific toil and industrial might arrived on July 16, 1945, in the desolate New Mexico desert. The Trinity test, the world's first detonation of an atomic bomb, confirmed the terrifying efficacy of the weapon. Witnesses, from seasoned physicists to young graduate students, were left reeling by a phenomenon that transcended all previous human experience. Elizabeth Graves, 7 months pregnant, diligently measured the strange, odd white powdery substance that settled on surfaces in the aftermath. It was a chilling reminder of the unknown consequences unleashed. The blast tore a 6-foot deep, 1,200-foot diameter crater in the desert floor. It left behind fused radioactive green sand, known as trinitite. The raw, unleashed power was undeniable. It was a stark, irrefutable proof of concept. The gadget was ready. Armed with the coded message, "The baby is born," from General Groves, confirming Trinity's blinding success, President Truman arrived at the Potsdam Conference. His demeanor visibly changed. Newfound confidence radiated as he met with Churchill and Stalin. On July 26th, the Allied leaders issued the Potsdam Proclamation. It was a final, stark ultimatum to Japan: surrender unconditionally, or face prompt and utter destruction. The message was clear. It was a desperate gambit to avoid the bloody invasion planned for the Japanese home islands. Such an operation was projected to cost countless American and Japanese lives. Japan's leadership, however, remained defiant. Their rejection of the Potsdam Proclamation sealed their fate. The military leadership, clinging to the hope of a negotiated peace, dismissed the ultimatum. They refused to accept unconditional surrender. This refusal directly led to Truman's fateful decision. The atomic bomb would be deployed. At 8:15 a.m. local time on August 6, 1945, the Enola Gay soared over Hiroshima. The city, an important military target, vanished in an instant. The single atomic bomb, Little Boy, unleashed a force that dwarfed anything witnessed before. It created a hellscape of unimaginable suffering. Stafford Warren, head of the Manhattan Project's medical section, would later describe Hiroshima as stunk terribly, and there were flies everywhere, a mass of flies crawling over a formerly white shirt. Japanese journalist Nakamura recounted the gruesome task of retrieving bodies. He described a burnt arm grabbing a boat, its skin peeling off in sheets. It was a horrifying image of human remains reduced to raw, flayed tissue. The world reeled, confronted with a new, terrifying reality of warfare. Just 2 days later, on August 8th, the Soviet Union declared war on Japan. they launched a swift invasion of Manchuria. This removed any last hope for Japanese mediation through Moscow. It further isolated a nation already reeling. The pressure intensified. On August 9th, despite persistent challenges with the mission, a second atomic bomb, Fat Man, detonated over Nagasaki. The city, devastated, became the second grim testament to this new age of destruction. The combined shock of the atomic bombings and the Soviet invasion proved to be the breaking point. On August 14, 1945, Japan announced its unconditional surrender. This officially brought World War II to a decisive, brutal end. The most destructive conflict in human history concluded, but at a profound cost. It ushered in an era defined by the terrifying specter of nuclear annihilation. The atomic bomb had irrevocably altered global power dynamics. It forced humanity to grapple with an existential threat of its own making. The dawn of 1,000 suns had indeed arrived. It forever changed the trajectory of international relations and the very definition of peace. The mushroom clouds that bloomed over Hiroshima and Nagasaki, bringing a brutal end to the Second World War, also ripped open a veil of secrecy. This veil had shrouded the Manhattan Project for years. For the tens of thousands of ordinary men and women who had toiled in the clandestine cities like Oak Ridge, the revelation was a seismic shock. It was a profound reckoning with the immense power they had unknowingly helped unleash. The world, and their place within it, was irrevocably changed. The news had spread through Oak Ridge, like wildfire, a mixture of exhilaration and unease. Waldo Cohn, a scientist, famously broke years of silence, shouting "uranium" into the bewildered crowd. Bill Wilcox, another young chemist, marked T-Day on his calendar. It was a personal timestamp for the dawn of a new era. Yet, beneath the initial jubilation, a deeper, more complex set of emotions began to surface. Jacqueline Nichols, the wife of District Engineer Colonel Kenneth Nichols, confessed to being terribly disappointed that the bomb had been dropped on civilians. Virginia, the chemist who had meticulously analyzed tubuloy, found that even after the secret was out, true transparency was elusive. On a ferry, attempting to share her newfound knowledge, she was met with suspicion and accusation. It was a stark reminder of how deeply ingrained the culture of silence had become. The moral weight of this new age settled heavily on its creators. J. Robert Oppenheimer, the scientific director, sought out President Truman. He confessed, "Mr. President, I feel I have blood on my hands." Truman, ever the pragmatist, was dismissive. He later referred to Oppenheimer as a crybaby scientist, and his confession as belly-aching. This stark exchange highlighted the immense chasm between the scientific architects of the bomb and the political leaders who wielded it. It was a burden that would define the nuclear age. In the immediate aftermath, the public clamored for understanding. Henry DeWolf Smith's official report, published shortly after the war, attempted to demystify the project. Yet, as its preface candidly admitted, it omitted many interesting developments. This was particularly true for the crucial contributions of women. Early narratives also tended to downplay the longer-lasting effects of radiation. They focused instead on the immediate lethality. Films like The Beginning or The End further muddied the waters. They fabricated scenes that even Lizzie Meitner, whose theoretical explanation of fission was pivotal, dismissed as nonsense. This included the absurd notion of her carrying the bomb in my purse. For Oak Ridge, a city born of wartime necessity, the future was uncertain. The war was over, and the singular purpose that had driven its creation now seemed to evaporate. The population plummeted from a wartime peak of nearly 75,000 to just over 42,000 by the end of 1946. 20,000 jobs were lost as sections of the Y-12 plant began to shut down. The question lingered, what would become of this temporary secret city? The path to self-governance was long and winding. On August 1, 1946, President Truman signed the Atomic Energy Act. It shifted control of atomic power from military to civilian hands. This foreshadowed a future for Oak Ridge beyond military command. The very next day, a shipment of carbon-14 for medical purposes departed from Oak Ridge. It was a potent symbol of the dual potential for both destruction and peaceful application that the atomic age presented. Yet, the town itself remained a federal reservation governed by the Atomic Energy Commission, or AEC. The ceremonial opening of the Elza Gate on March 19, 1949, was a powerful moment. It featured a miniature mushroom cloud created by ignited magnesium tape. This was a visual metaphor for the lingering power and mystery. But independence remained elusive. A 1953 town meeting vote rejected incorporation. This highlighted the community's uncertainty. It wasn't until the Atomic Energy Act was amended in 1954 and the Atomic Energy Community Act passed in 1955 that the true path forward emerged. Finally, the Oak Ridge Law was signed on March 20, 1957. This led to a decisive vote for incorporation on May 5, 1959, and full independence by June 1960. As one editorial noted, the town's pioneer spirit had evolved into an entrepreneurial one. It was a testament to its resilience and adaptability. Even as Oak Ridge navigated its new identity, the global landscape shifted dramatically. On August 29, 1949, the Soviet Union detonated its first nuclear bomb. This shattered America's atomic monopoly and ignited the Cold War. The world plunged into an era of mutually assured destruction. The specter of nuclear annihilation became a constant companion. Espionage, fueled by figures like Klaus Fuchs, David Greenglass, and George Koval, who had passed secrets to the Soviets, led to a climate of fear and suspicion. It culminated in the execution of Ethel and Julius Rosenberg. Fear gripped American society. It gave rise to the Federal Civil Defense Administration's infamous Bert the Turtle campaign in 1950. It taught children to duck and cover in the event of a nuclear attack. The arms race escalated to terrifying heights. The Soviets detonated a 58-megaton weapon in 1961. It was 4,000 times more powerful than the Hiroshima bomb. President Eisenhower warned that the awful arithmetic of the atomic bomb does not permit of any such easy solution. A glimmer of hope flickered with the Limited Nuclear Test Ban Treaty, signed on August 5, 1963. Though President Kennedy's assassination just months later cast a long shadow over its promise. Within Oak Ridge, social changes began to ripple through the community. The Supreme Court's landmark 1954 ruling against school segregation finally reached the secret city. This led to the integration of Oak Ridge schools in 1955. This transition, while not without tension and scrawled obscenities, ultimately saw classes mix. Dorothy, Katty, and Willie's daughter graduated as the last valedictorian of Scarborough High School the spring before integration. It was a poignant marker of a changing era. Years later, as a museum docent at a Y12 display, Dorothy would face an accusatory woman. She asked if Dorothy was ashamed of building the bomb. Dorothy's reply, simple yet profound, encapsulated the complex emotions of many Oak Ridge residents. "Well," she said, "they killed my brother." The public perception of nuclear energy, once a symbol of scientific triumph and national power, shifted dramatically. This occurred after the 3 Mile Island accident in March 1979. It was an event that saw even Chuck, Tony's husband, transferred to the site. New questions about safety and the future of nuclear power emerged. They fundamentally altered the global conversation. Yet, amidst the fear and ethical quandaries, efforts towards reconciliation and understanding also took root. Colleen Black, now an English as a second language teacher, forged an unlikely friendship with Kisetsu Yamada. Yamada was a Hibakusha